Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Cerny has been giving yet more interviews on the PlayStation 4, giving further insights into the architecture and the hardware and the performance of the system. So in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be analysing it and giving my thoughts and opinions to it, as well as, of course, discussing the interview as a whole. So, as I'm sure many of you are aware by now, Mark Cerny is indeed the lead architect, and the idea behind the PlayStation 4, of course, he pitched the idea of an x86 system, and he did much studying on the architecture, despite the fact that even the original Xbox One, as I'll call it, the very original Xbox, of course, was x86. It had kind of a Celeron type of processor within it. And Microsoft decided to not go that route for the follow-up system, and of course then they later went back on that and decided to continue with the Xbox One. And Mark's spoken quite heavily about that, as well as the challenges of the system and so forth. So we're going to discuss an interviews. There have been several, and a lot of it is stuff that we've already discussed before, so I'm just going to cut that out and I'm going to speak about new stuff, because that's much more important, I think, rather than recounting old ground. So anyway, first snippet of one interview. We wanted the focus to be on the games that the creative directors wanted to make, rather than the minute pieces of hardware that's universal, that's true, whether you're talking Destiny with their 700 strong team, or you're talking about one guy doing everything. They wanted to focus on the creative vision. At the same time, we have to balance that out, rich features set out, so they can use the later years of the hardware. The hardware has to grow over time. That's why I refer to it as a supercharged PC architecture. There's more to it than what you'll find in a PC. There are all these customizations, such as what we did on the GPU and other parts of the system, ensure that there would really be systems that programmers could dig into in 3 or 4 years of the console's life cycle. The developers really have a chance to study the architecture because it doesn't change for many years. They can learn its secrets and get progressively better performance out of it. Consoles provide a stable platform. This is really important because some developers need 5 years to create a game. The fact that during a 5-year period the target hardware doesn't change really allows them to bring titles to the world that couldn't exist otherwise. Now, let's speak a little bit, now of course, on the processor. Now, as I mentioned at the very start of this, there was a lot of discussions back when he was first looking at the CPU, and he himself mentioned that there were possibilities of continuing the route of the cell, and one of the possibilities, of course, the one they ended up going with, was the x86. Now, as I said, Microsoft tried it with the very original Xbox, and the results were fairly reasonable, but then they dismissed it, and they didn't go with it eventually for numerous reasons. So Mark's actually commented on this, and he said, "Well, I was looking at on my holiday, and as a slight aside, you guys are aware that he spent a lot of his vacation actually studying the x86 architecture. Anyway, back to it. Was just the instruction set of the CPUs, and it really seemed that things are changing recently, and maybe we were on the verge of transformation in the x86 architecture and how it would be used. That didn't mean that we would necessarily use an x86 architecture. All that happened as a result was that I wondered if we could add it to a list of options, and then when our hardware project kicked off in 2008, I and the ICE team and a number of technology people within Sony did a very detailed analysis of x86 and how the code would work on that versus our processors. So we looked at the kind of things that you could be doing with SPUs, and we looked at general purpose code. We thought about writing an assembly for the platform versus others. We looked at compiled code and did about 15 different presentations showing off various aspects of the x86 architecture. And our first big meeting on PlayStation 4 was the first party teams. We spent most of the day going through our learnings on x86, and we'd come to the conclusion that it was useful in a console, but we had to ask them if they thought it was useful too in a console. He also mentioned further about the PlayStation 4 and consoles as a whole versus PC, and he said, and I quote, "Consoles hit above their weight when you look at the price-performance ratio. There are a few reasons behind that. One is the software layer in between the game's creators and the hardware is much thinner than on PC. Another reason is that the hardware doesn't change, so you can focus on just one particular architecture and learn a lot about it in the games over the years. You'll see the benefits in terms of the graphics and quality, the real-world simulation and the like. On top of that, we did a significant amount of customizations to the GPU to make sure that we had an extra target for people to go after in 2016-17. Put that all together, and I think the future is looking really bright with the PS4. Now, as an aside, and my own thoughts on this is, it's not really new for consoles to do this. Consoles have routinely performed extremely well on their first couple of years in the market. And I know I've used this example several times over, but developers are still really getting to grips, and I would argue have probably just about learned everything there is to learn now with, say, the PlayStation 3. I use the PS3 rather than the Xbox for one simple reason. It is a considerably harder piece of hardware to utilize fully. Sony themselves have admitted this, and as well as other various games developers. One of the reasons behind that is the SPUs, which of course need to be heavily utilized to fully make use of the hardware. So the CPU of the PS3 can handle 2 threads, but the SPUs can be used for numerous other purposes as well. These include data defragmentation, data movement, helping with the graphical effects, anti-aliasing, and so on and so on. So obviously consoles in that respect grow over time, because it's a simple case of they have to, because you are left with a certain hardware layer, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Now, it's actually worth noting that several large developers, including Electronic Arts and Ubisoft, have spoken quite heavily about the issues with long console life. They don't want to wait, say, 7 years for the next generation, and if you were to look at the Xbox 360, for example, it has been around for a long time now. And there are numerous issues with this. Most of them are hardware stagnation, and it also really starts to cripple your creative vision, because I mentioned several times before, there have been numerous cases where software developers have simply had to just say, you know what, we can't do this on the hardware. It's simple as that, black and white answer. You can want to do something, you can have the artistic tools to do that, you can have the vision, you can have the programming ability, you could have everything ready to be implemented, but the system just cannot do it at a decent frame rate, and there are numerous reasons behind that. Simply because that, obviously, as we, customers, expect better graphical fidelity, better AI, better physics, better textures, and so on and so on and so on and so on, there is a limit on how much that console can be pushed. Now, Mark and his team are definitely very good in the fact that they have provided a very customizable piece of hardware. But I have a couple of issues, and this is actually something I have with both hardware developers, including Microsoft as well. But specifically as well for Sony. I have a little bit of an issue when they call it a supercharged PC architecture, because to me that's a bit of a buzzword. That's a little bit of a cheating way of saying that, you know what, we've got this hardware and we've changed it around a little bit here and there and so on. It's definitely going to be easier to use than a PC, I would say. From what I've read, simply because of one memory pool and so forth. However, the fact is the matter is, in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, we don't know what DirectX versions we're going to have out for the PC. We don't know what levels of GPU power we've got out there. I've mentioned before that Epic Games were fairly expectant. They really did want 2.5 teraflops of computing power for the next generation systems. And there were reasons behind this, and they knew that, quite simply put, that the systems are going to have to continue to evolve. They're going to be pushed in ways that we've never seen before. And if you were to take a look at the PlayStation 4, it has a ridiculously good amount of memory, loads of bandwidth, and so on, and that's great. I have no issues with that. But I find the verbiage where he says, you know, it's going to continue to grow, a little bit of a I don't think it's necessarily untruthful, because obviously you're going to continue to learn new programming techniques. You're going to continue to refine those programming techniques. But I would say that it's completely and utterly not, but in my personal opinion anyway, not really accurate to say that it will continue to evolve, it will continue to grow with you, because it's not able to. It is a static hardware platform, and by the time, let's say 2016, 2017 hit around, it's going to be very interesting to see just how much further they're going to be able to push this thing. I've already heard rumours going from various forums and so on, and you could actually check these out on RGT. I'm not going to bother to go too much into it because it's a really, really lengthy subject. So you could check out the Unreal Engine demos on this channel, and there was some, especially to do with the lighting. In fact, I've got one video for Killzone lighting you should really watch if you're interested in this, and it really goes into how Epic had to take away some of the lighting techniques for the next Unreal Engine, because they believe, I mean, this is what the rumors state anyway, and they seem pretty accurate, that they just knew that this next generation hardware couldn't handle it, and therefore they just said, you know what, we're not going to bother to keep coding this for PCs as well. And to be fair, the issue is, even with PCs, say lower to mid-range PCs particularly, they couldn't handle it either. We're seeing graphics cards now, of course, that have a ridiculous amount of power, but the practicality is that a lot of games simply wouldn't be able to do this. And one of the issues that games have on PC when they require a lot of oomph, I mean, back in, was it 2007, I think, Crysis, the original Crysis released. If you guys really want entertainment, and I suggest you do this, you know, whenever you can be bothered, try and find some threads from about 2007/early 2008, or whenever the hell Crysis released. I'm sure it's 2007. Probably going to get a glut of comments saying, no, it was X, but regardless, let's just assume it's 2007. Look at a glut of threads on that time when this game was released, and what you'll notice is there were two types of people. There were those who absolutely were furious that the game just wouldn't run at absolute max settings on their hardware, and then there were the other type of people, those who were just like, oh my god, I can't wait to try and run this game on the best settings, and they were just spending, you know, hundreds or if not thousands in some cases on SLI setups or multi-GPU configurations and goodness knows what else, and that's the problem. Anyway, I'm going to continue. So about the CPU configuration, as you are most likely aware, there are 8 CPU cores inside the PlayStation 4. Now these are, as I've said many times previously, these are from an AMD Jaguar. Now these are two sets of cores, because they're actually 4 times 2. These are split in 2 modules. Can handle 1 hardware thread each, and Mark's actually been speaking about this as well. I think of it as a supercharged PC architecture, there's that phrase again, and that's because we have gone in and altered a number of ways to make it better for gaming. We have unified memory, which certainly makes creating games easier. That was a #1 feature requested by games companies, because you don't have to worry about splitting your programmable assets from graphical assets, because they are never in the ratios that the hardware designers choose for their memory. And then you have the GPU. We went in and made sure that it were better for asynchronous fine-grained compute, because we believe in what regards to the GPU. Again, in a couple of years' time as a cycle, it'll be used for a lot more than graphics. Now, what I say, that many people say, but we want the best possible graphics, and it turns out they're not incompatible. If you look at how the GPU and its various subcomponents are utilized throughout the frame, there are many portions throughout the frame, for example, during rendering of opaque shadow maps, that the bulk of the GPU is unused. So if you're not going to compute for collision detection, physics, or ray tracing for audio during these frames, you're not really affecting the graphics. You're utilizing portions of the GPU that are instant or otherwise underutilized. So if you look at the frame, you can see that depending on what the phase is, what portions are available to use for compute. Now, I actually think this is a very, this is out of quote of course, I think this is a very important point. The basic premise here, and I'll translate it for you guys just in case you're not exactly sure what he means. The GPU is of course, going to be used for a multitude of different things. This includes physics, this includes audio computation, this includes AI in some cases, this even includes, for example, defragmentation of memory. Now, the purpose here is that some people are concerned that if you have X, whatever X is of GPU power, if you are then splitting that X, let's talk about it in terms of utilization. It makes it a hell of a lot easier. So let's talk about it between 1 and 100. Most people assume that the basic premise here is that if you have if you have 100% utilization for the graphics, obviously you're going to get the best graphics possible. They're worried that if you start to pile on physics, AI, and so on in this, that it'll be more like, say, 75% graphics and 25% AI and physics or whatever. I'm just going to call it others, or compute. Now, Mark is basically saying that this is not necessarily the case, and their GPU, when it's idle, that's when it will be doing these other calculations. And that's why they are so interested in the whole premise, the whole ideology of GPU, which, in case you're not aware, means general purpose computing on a GPU. GPU being graphics card or graphics processing unit. Now, Mark also addresses latency in GDDR5 RAM. Now, it does have higher latency than DDR3. However, Mark himself is fairly confident that he said, and I quote, the GDDR5 latency isn't particularly higher. He also says that the GPUs are designed to of extraordinarily latency tolerant, so I can't imagine that being much of a factor. Now, end quote. I'm going to be doing a couple of tech analysis videos over the next couple of weeks regarding GDDR5 versus DDR3 memory in terms of latency, because this has been one of those things that just seems to keep rearing its head. So I'm going to be putting that out in not too distant future, or maybe do it as an article. I'm not sure which one. Depends, I guess, which one lends itself better. So, once again, a lot of this stuff isn't particularly new. A lot of this stuff is just kind of going over new ground and giving us new ideas and thoughts and so on of what he thinks of it. So overall, my thoughts remain pretty consistent. I think the PlayStation 4 is going to be a fantastic system. I have doubts, however, over the next, say, 3 years on just how well it's going to be doing graphically compared to, say, high-end PCs. It will also be extremely interesting if Nintendo decide to, I don't know, release a new system. I'm not saying that that's been confirmed or anything. I'm just merely speculating. Right now, of course, the PS4 is definitely the most powerful out of the current consoles that have either been announced or are, just about to be released. So, for example, the PS4, the Xbox One, and the Wii U. The PS4 definitely has numerous advantages. We'll have to just see if those advantages remain consistent for a long period of time, as Mark insists. I am extremely, however, looking forward to the games on the PS4, and I think it's about time that, honestly speaking, we see shorter shelf lives for hardware. I think that's one of the issues we've really had. I'm actually not someone who subscribes to the point of view that we're going to be seeing a limitation on shelf life for consoles. I think they're going to be around for a long time yet. I think there's going to be at least one more generation of consoles. So, say, for example, the PlayStation 5. Because I'm actually someone who really doesn't like the idea of the cloud-based gaming exclusively for numerous reasons. One, I don't like the idea of the games as a service, and this has been something I've alluded to multiple times on the Xbox One videos. Plus, another reason I don't like it is latency. In addition to all of that, I just like the idea of owning the system and having that do all of the work in my own home. So that's just my thoughts, of course, so I have no real allusions to this. I think that we're going to be seeing a lot of different stuff over the next couple of years, however, and I think that computing is going to definitely move forward because of it. Regardless, it's been a fairly short video for me. I will, as I said, my plans for next generation / tech videos are quite numerous over the next couple of weeks. I will be doing a lot of them, especially regarding the PlayStation 4. I'll be doing more on the memory structure, a lot more stuff on PC as well, because as I said in a couple of videos, I feel that my coverage on that has been a little bit lackluster. It's not really been intentional on my part, it's just a simple case of there is so many darn pieces of console news at the moment. Also, I have complete and utter plans to be buying a PlayStation 4, which is on a pre-order. Most likely we'll be pre-ordering the Xbox One as well. I'll also be doing tech comparison videos between various platforms, including, of course, PC and PS4 as well. Anyway, that's just about it for this particular video. Hopefully you found it somewhat illuminating. I will get going for now. Take care and bye for now. Oh, by the way, guys, before I forget, you have until the 17th of July, that is Wednesday, for the competition that we are running, so if you've not entered it, please do so. Anyway, bye for now and take care.